Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we thine unworthy servants here gathered together in thy name do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that, we having thy fear always before our eyes and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the results of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace, and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of all hearts, of persons, and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Just before we begin, first of all, apologize to the members of the Senate and our visitors for the late start this morning. We are to be starting the Senate at 10 a.m. We are 34 minutes late. As usual, before we begin the business of the day, we have some visitors here, young men, young women, and 2 teachers. In fact, 27 students in all from the Morant Bay High School in St. Thomas. We want to welcome you to this session of the Senate. I'm sure that you recognize the special significance of this house, which is called Gordon House, of course, and named after one of the participants in the Morant Bay Rebellion. And you all know who that is, right? Yes. Excellent. So welcome to your parliament. And you're always welcome here, yourself and your teachers. It's your parliament, and you're always welcome to come and observe. And today we're going to take, I think, one bill which will become law, and during the course of the morning, as I've been doing, I'll send a copy of the bill up to your teachers so that you can have an idea as to what is happening. So welcome again, and if I don't get a chance to address you again, safe travel back to St. Thomas at the end of the sitting. I'm also bringing to the attention of this Honourable Senate, and thanks to Senator Morris, bringing to the attention of the Senate that today is World Press Freedom Day. And I'm going to invite briefly a comment from Minister Charles and from Senator Morris.
President, might I first be permitted to speak from a seat, not normally mine?
Yes.
Yeah, not officially. Yeah, right. You need to put it on the order paper for me longer. Mr. President, as we acknowledge World Press Freedom Day, we also use the opportunity to acknowledge the excellence and the consistency of our press here in Jamaica, who have been such an integral part of our democracy and of the important element of providing information to our people on what the government is doing and intends to do. We have the responsibility not only to make laws, but to ensure that we set the goals and set the means by which we will operate to pursue our goals in Jamaica. That requires the participation of all of the society, a whole of society approach, which, as part and parcel of that, the media plays such an integral role in ensuring the participation of our people in the process of pursuing our own goals. Jamaica ranks within the top 10 in the world. We have, for the last 3 years, been between ranking of 6 to 8. I believe now we're ranked at 8. But we have consistently demonstrated in Jamaica the kind of acknowledgement of the press, which has allowed them to carry out their role and function in our democracy without threat of any serious violence. There will be, of course, times when there are challenges and time when there is questions as to the accuracy of information, and that is within the robust to and fro that is expected. But all in all, our press in Jamaica has been accommodated in ways that they're not accommodated in many countries. The press in some countries have to treat with blatant attacks and tendencies for the state to have censorship, which we in Jamaica do not face. And so, as a functioning democracy, Mr. President, we acknowledge today as a very important day. We acknowledge the role of the press in holding all of us here in Senate accountable, private and public sector accountable, but also in the highlighting of the successes of the country. And so I know that there has been a lot to highlight in the last 3 years, and I want, on behalf of the administration, thank the press for playing their part in ensuring that the country is aware of the several things that are taking place in our country that are positive. Why I say so is because, yes, in our reality as human beings, there's positive and negative. But as a country, we all want the best for Jamaica. And we must acknowledge that the press has so far expressed a balanced and fair and fearless approach. There are circumstances, Mr. President, and I highlight a concern, where we acknowledge that there's also aspects of social media and other aspects of persons who now may utilize the need for information to pass, and unfortunately they pass fake news or fake information or inaccurate information, which has a very negative impact on the perception and reality which society has of the conduct and activities of some of the leadership in our country. And so we raise that concern, knowing that we're living in a time when over 3 billion people are utilizing social media, and when there are increases of almost 10% yearly of the users. And so it highlights even more the importance of acknowledging our official press and their responsibility to not only pass information, but to highlight where wrong information is being distributed and disseminated to our people. Mr. President, in closing, again, we want to thank all who have contributed to the excellence which we have in that industry. I know that we have also educational institutions in Jamaica that have not only served locally, but have served as regional hubs to provide the kind of expertise and knowledge that is required for us to develop in those who serve within the press area the skills to carry out their responsibilities. Even here in Senate, we have several persons, journalists and otherwise, who all contribute to our information being facilitated and disseminated to our people. And so we thank them. Though we have the emerging concerns, we know that as we press on together, every year that we acknowledge World Press Freedom Day, we acknowledge the strength of our democracy, and we will do all that is required to ensure that we continue to have a healthy democracy and a healthy press and media, and that they continue to carry out their duty, to, as I said, Mr. President, to be fair, fearless, balanced, accurate, and informative.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Senator Morris. I recognize you from a seat other than your own.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise to join in recognizing and acknowledging today as World Press Freedom Day, and to express our profound appreciation from the members of this side to all who work in the media fraternity for their contribution to the development and advancement of our nation. Mr. President, I take note that Jamaica, over the years, have ensured that our media is at the center of our national development. And this is borne, in fact, Mr. President, by the number of media houses that we have. We have over 30 radio stations. We have over 4 television stations. We have, Mr. President, 2 major national newspapers and a plethora of community newspapers. We have a number of cable providers. And then, Mr. President, over the past 10 or so years, we have seen an exponential growth in digital media in terms of new media platforms. And estimates are pointing to well over close to 2 million of our citizens having access to new media. Now, Mr. President, all of that has contributed to the free flow of information in our society. And that sets the stage for a thriving media fraternity in our country. But, Mr. President, one of the things that I take note of, and I appreciate our international ranking, in that we are within the top 10 countries in the world in terms of our press freedom. But the numbers or the ranking this year isn't going in the direction that certainly I would like to see it, and the members of this Honourable Senate on my side would like to see it, because it has slipped from 6th to 8th. And I am wondering, when I saw the slippage, I was wondering if it had anything to do with the fact that for a great portion of last year, there was the abandonment of the press conference that you would generally have after cabinet meetings, the post-cabinet press briefing, and it took a long while and intense lobbying from the Press Association of Jamaica and other civil society groups calling for the return of the post-cabinet press briefing. And I was wondering if that had anything to do with the deterioration in our ranking. We have to make sure that in any modern democracy, there is free flow of information between the leaders of our country and the citizens, and that has to be channeled through our press. And we have to make sure that we provide the environment where they have access to information. One of the things that I have taken note, Mr. President, is that there is a need for more penetrated and intense investigative journalism in our society. I think over the past few years we have seen a sort of step back from some of our journalists to go forth and really go beneath the surface and get the sort of information that the public needs as it relates to different issues affecting our society. And I again started to wonder, based on my knowledge and involvement with the media fraternity, if it had anything to do, Mr. President, with the fact that those who work in the media have been poorly compensated for their efforts. And so you don't find that individuals are prepared to make that risk to go forward and do really penetrating information, because there's a minefield of information that is out there right now in this environment that needs to be exposed to the general public. And, but I get the sense of timidity on the part of some of our journalists to going forward to ferret out that information to get to the public. And I link that, the only thing I can link it to is that a man don't want to make that sort of risk because, of the levels of compensation that is offered. And I want to take the opportunity. I want to take the opportunity, Mr. President, to make sure that I call for those who are operating in the media fraternity to make sure that journalists are properly compensated so that they are emboldened to do the sort of work that we want them to do to get information amidst the environment that we operate in. So we want serious investigative journalism, but serious investigative journalism comes with a price, and you have to make sure you have well-trained, well-paid, professional journalists who will be fearless in their effort and don't have to look over their shoulder because, they are worried as to what is going to happen to them. So, Mr. President, we celebrate with the media fraternity, and we acknowledge the tremendous work that they have done and will continue to do for us as Jamaicans. And we want to celebrate with them from the side of the chamber in terms of World Press Freedom Day. May it please, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. President, if I might just have the briefest of words, just to also add my thanks and congratulations to the media fraternity, to the Press Association of Jamaica, the Media Association of Jamaica, all the media houses and their teams, which every day continue to make sure that information flows freely to the people of Jamaica and internationally, and the respect which they have garnered for us in placing us so highly on this table, on this index that's highly regarded globally. I think it's important for us to note that one of the messages which I take from the change from 6th to 8th is the fact that we cannot be complacent. So it may never be a fact of Jamaica having done less or our fraternity having done less, or our government having done less, but the fact that other countries have done more while ours has remained the same. Robust, but the same. So New Zealand and Denmark were the countries who rose above us in the last measurement, Mr. President. Two countries that have been striving hard to improve the freedom accorded to their press, and as a matter which they vaunt publicly and internationally. So we congratulate them. We note that complacency is not a good thing for us to, or rather we shouldn't rest comfortably where we are. But that we don't need to berate ourselves or seek to ascribe fault. We just need to work harder to maintain the place. And we also need to just celebrate the fact that we are still #1 in the region. So I just wanted to make that note as I add my thanks as well, Mr. President. I thank you.
May I two of my
Thank you very much.
Mr. President?
Senator Brown, hold on, man. Thank you very much.
I just alerting that I want to comment.
No, you can rise and I don't see you.
All right.
Thank you very much, Minister. Senator Brown.
Thank you, sir. Mr. President, the measurement of press freedom, it's okay. He's my friend. He's allowed, he allowed me sometimes to take my own. Mr. President, issue of press freedom, it's not about the work of the journalists. It's a measurement to which the state failed to interfere or obstruct the work of the journalists. I too commend the Association of our Media Practitioners for the vigor that they display. The vigor, for example, in 2017, April, in asking for freedom through the Freedom of Information, for information on the sale of the UDC land, but for which the press received no response from the government nor from the UDC. So freedom of the press can be celebrated when you deny them and prevent them from getting information to inform the public. Freedom of the press runs into difficulty when ministers of government look at state authority that regulates to say, put up or shut up. So the freedom of the press is not something that we just celebrate while recognizing that journalists who try to cover crime stories are pepper sprayed, arrested, as has happened to photojournalists in our country, and blocked from doing their proper investigation. So let us celebrate that others are doing worse than us. But let us not believe that what we're doing is great, because the freedom of the press is under challenge when you find government and government officials embrace corruption, because corruption undermines freedom of the press, because the corruption is often wrong, always wrong, and the people are not allowed to see. How can it be that a minister resigns or is fired and nobody knows? Where's the freedom of the press? We don't trust them to give them the information and to tell them what has become to the knowledge of the Prime Minister. So I celebrate freedom of the press as one who have dabbled in the press. But I recognize that that freedom is something we fight for as practitioners, and something that even this government, while cheering press freedom, oftentimes act in a way to block and undermine the freedom of the press. May it please you, Mr. President.
Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following. An annual report
Before the announcement,
of the
Mr. President, just before the announcement, could we get the usual list so I could follow it again? It's a requirement that we have agreed on.
Where is the list?
Mr. Marshall, every Friday we must tell the Marshall. Jesus Christ. It's the list of announcements. Every Friday.
Hang on, it's not a, look here, it's not a difficult thing, you know. Just go and get, look here. Hello, Mr. Marshall. Pay attention to me, no man. You see the announcement there? Just go and get it copied immediately while I sit here, and it won't happen again. So just give it to him, Miss Curtis. Give it to him.
I propose, Mr. President, that we move on and recommit the announcement when the notice is provided.
So hear what I'm telling you. It happens every Friday. So I'm going to send and get it copied now, and it won't happen again. Simple. It's being printed now, so I'm going to ask that I'll recommit the item of announcements. Okay? And bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives.
The following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives. I have the honor to inform the Honourable Senate that on the 30th day of April 2019, a bill entitled An Act to Validate and Confirm All Acts in relation to the registration and classification of prospective contractors, including the charging of fees done in good faith and inadvertent as to the absence of statutory authority by the National Contracts Commission and other persons in the exercise of its function in purported fulfillment of its principal objects during the period concerning on February 11, 1999, and ending on the day appointed for the coming into operation of the Public Procurement Act 2015 to indemnify persons against liability arising out of their carrying out of such acts and for connected matters, was passed in the House of Representatives without amendment. Signed, Pernell Charles, CD, MP, JP.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Mr. President, I signify my willingness to take charge of the bill.
A bill shortly entitled the National Contracts Commission Validation and Indemnity Act 2019 read the first time.
Minister, Mr. President, I ask for a second reading of the bill.
Thank you. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions.
At the expiration of 21 days, I'll ask the leader of government visit, the Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, the following question the people demand.
Thank you, Senator Morris. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. And I am recommitting announcements. Not here as yet. I'll do so at a later date. Thank you. Later time, I should say. Public business. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the matter before us today is not a controversial one, I'm pleased to say. It is the bill entitled An Act to Amend...
Sorry, Minister, just before you proceed, on the last occasion, we had dealt with the Food Storage and Prevention of Infestation Amendment Act. The Food Storage Prevention and Amendment Act, you're not going to continue that today? Okay, I didn't see that. Thank you, Ram. Go ahead, please. It's okay. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Protection of Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture Act, which seeks to amend a few provisions of the Principal Act of 2013. Mr. President, the Principal Act was promulgated to support Jamaica's obligations under the 2001 International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, which Jamaica ratified in 2006. The treaty aims to guarantee food security through the conservation, exchange, and sustainable use of the world's plant genetic resources for food and agriculture. One of its core aspects is the understanding that the sustainable use of plant genetic resources is fundamental for achieving food and nutrition security both at the global and national levels. Another aspect of the treaty is the fair and equitable benefit sharing arising from the use of plant genetic resources. Mr. President, the aims of the treaty, of course, are extremely important to Jamaica, given the bounty of natural resources and scientific potential which we have right here in our wonderful country. So we must therefore ensure that the structures we have in place to facilitate these aims are effective and make best use of our limited financial and human resources. In this context, Mr. President, the bill before us today seeks to implement the decision of Cabinet number 2118, dated June 11, 2018, in which approval was given for the following. 1. The integration of certain functions of the Management Authority established under the Protection of Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture Act 2013 into the ministry responsible for agriculture through its Research and Development Division. The functions to be so integrated are set out in sections 6B to E, 9 and 10 of the Act. 2. The removal of body corporate status from the Management Authority and the designation of the Research and Development Division of the Ministry responsible for agriculture or any other entity so designated by ministerial order as the Management Authority. And 3, the establishment of a Plant Genetic Resource Advisory Task Force constituting of members listed in the first schedule of the Act in order to carry out the advisory functions as set out in Section 6A of the Act. Mr. President, the decision of Cabinet is aligned with the Government of Jamaica's Public Sector Transformation and Modernization Program, which has been broadly designed to increase the overall effectiveness of public sector service delivery, reduce cost of government, and to contribute to economic growth and development. Mr. President, passage of the bill today will enable functions of the Management Authority, other than providing policy advice, to be formally assumed by the Research and Development Division of the Ministry responsible for agriculture. More particularly, the amendments will require that the Ministry integrate the activities under the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resource for Food and Agriculture into the government's relevant agricultural and rural development policies and programs. 2, cooperate with the relevant international organizations in order to establish or strengthen the capabilities of developing countries with respect to sustainable use of plant genetic resources, and to promote the sharing and exchanging of plant genetic resources. It will also be required, Mr. President, to manage the Plant Resources Fund
and to establish and maintain the register of plant genetic resources. Furthermore, Mr. President, the group of persons named under the Principal Act as the Management Authority, who have in fact been functioning in an advisory capacity regarding research, will now formally be named as an advisory task force and will otherwise function as set out under the first schedule of the Principal Act as it will be amended. They will advise the Minister on matters of policy and legal measures that provide for the conservation and sustainable use of plant genetic resources and the equitable sharing of the benefits arising out of their use. Members of the Management Authority include representatives from the Ministry responsible for the environment, NEPA, the SRC, and persons qualified in the areas of botany or representatives of farmers and plant breeders. So as the advisory task force, Mr. President, these categories will remain the same and of course continue advisory research, in their advisory capacity, functioning together with the Research and Development Division. Mr. President, the bill before us therefore seeks to assure full integration into the ministry responsible for agriculture by repealing the provision in the Principal Act which provides for corporate status of the Management Authority while ensuring that Jamaica continues to operate as required under the treaty. Mr. President, the language of the treaty is broad enough to accommodate this, the contracting party being Jamaica and there being no stipulation as to the form of which the body should take. The bill seeks to align our public sector transformation procedures and undertakings with our international obligations. I would like to make the point, Mr. President, that there will be no impact in terms of job losses because there actually had not been full administrative corporatization of the Management Authority. So it wasn't actually a separate entity that employed separately and that now needs to be rationalized. Persons who function therein functioned together with the Research and Development Division as it exists. So what actually will happen now by virtue of this act is an alignment with the reality, closer to the reality, with some adjustments to make sure that our accountability lines, as well as efficiency and effectiveness of assignment of roles and responsibilities will be more clearly implemented and implementable. Mr. President, it will also, of course, obviate the need to seek funding for the establishment of this separate entity, which had not yet been completed. This, of course, undoubtedly being one of the considerations. Mr. President, the bill was passed in that other place on the 26th of February without any amendments, and I will now turn to the clause by clause. Mr. President, the Clause 1 provides for the short title of the Act and stipulates, of course, that the bill is to be read with the Principal Act. Clause 2 amends Section 2 by inserting a new definition for the Advisory Task Force and by deleting the existing definition of the Management Authority, replacing it with a new definition which now means the Research and Development Division of the Ministry responsible for agriculture or such entity as designated by the Minister by order published in the Gazette. Clause 3 deletes the current Section 4 of the bill, Mr. President, and replaces it with a new provision dealing with the establishment and constitution of the Advisory Task Force, again in accordance with the first schedule of the Principal Act. Clause 4 repeals Section 5 of the Principal Act, which was the section which allowed the Minister to give directions of a general character as to policy, but this clearly would no longer be relevant or necessary because those aspects will now be treated with differently as the Management Authority itself will be within the Ministry as the Research and Development Division, and the other provisions will be set out in the first schedule as the responsibility of the Advisory Task Force. Mr. President, Clause 5 is relevant to the adjustment of which I just spoke because it amends the current Section 6 of the Principal Act by deleting paragraph A, and paragraph A is that paragraph that sets out the policy recommendation aspect of the responsibilities, which fell under the Management Authority. It proposes, Mr. President, to delete paragraph A and re-letter the remaining paragraphs as paragraphs A to D. It also amends paragraph A by deleting the words "a funding" and replacing them with the words "an approved funding," which is now the part of the requirement, of course, that they establish an approved, or rather seek approved funding mechanisms in order to support the goals of the bill and the treaty. Mr. President, Clause 6 amends the first schedule of the Principal Act in the heading, as well as in paragraphs 1, 4.1, 5, 6.1, and 7 to 12, by deleting the words "Management Authority" wherever they appear, and in each case replacing them with the words "Advisory Task Force." Other amendments to the first schedule are as follows. 1. The current marginal note at paragraph 1 will be deleted and replaced with the words "Constitution and Functions of the Advisory Task Force." And then in paragraph 1, the words "not less than 11 nor more than 13 members" will be deleted and replaced with the words "the head of Research and Development Division of the Ministry responsible for agriculture ex officio," and "not less than 10 nor more than 12 other members," thereby retaining, Mr. President, the same size of the Management Authority as currently composed when it becomes the Advisory Task Force. The paragraph is also amended by deleting subparagraph A and relettering paragraphs B to I as paragraphs A to H. Mr. President, paragraph 1 is to be renumbered as paragraph 1.1, and a subparagraph 2 is inserted, and that subparagraph 2 will set out from A to G the matters of policy and legal measures that the Advisory Task Force is charged with when advising the ministry. So these paragraphs, Mr. President, are the paragraphs lifted from section 6 of the bill, which have been moved from the Management Authority as it was defined and delineated under the Principal Act, and now fitting within the new mechanism under the Advisory Task Force. Mr. President, paragraph 11, and this is the last amendment, proposing the deletion of the word "salary," leaving honorarium or fees as the considerations for payment. Mr. President, this ends the clause-by-clause and summary of the Protection of Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture Amendment Bill 2019, and I commend this bill to the members of the Senate for their consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Commissioner Senator Skeffrey.
Thank you, Commissioner President. Mr. President, I agree with the leader of government business that this is not a controversial bill. What? In this context. You see, because we on this side, we on this side, we support the proposed amendments. We all understand the importance of employing genetic material to the sustainability of plants itself and ultimately to life. And important within the whole agriculture biodiversity to maintain species within the system, and not just to maintain species but to have quality species. We understand that plants are very important towards providing food as a critical aspect. And as you traverse at times, sometimes the quality that you have over a period of time is not what we really want to be. So at all times we have to ensure that we keep this in a sustainable way. And in that context, I spoke about the research and development unit within the Ministry of Agriculture. And that's critical, because if we are not researching, finding new knowledge, new way of doing things, so as to maintain what we currently have, then ultimately we will lose. And therefore, it's critical not to set up the unit or the department, but to give it necessary funding. That's always a critical issue, Mr. President. Sometimes we have all the best intent, but the funding is not what it ought to be. And also the required staffing with the technical skills to deal with the issues that we want to achieve from a bill of this nature. Also, I want the ministry can also to have a cultural shift and appreciation for the objective of a bill of this nature. Oftentimes to ensure we use our institutions to start to have that transformation among our citizens from an early age. And the school system is always the best place to start. Agriculture is always important, an important component. From primary school, the 4-H clubs always ensure you have that appreciation for agriculture. And they always have a lot of diversification methods and trying new things, experimenting. Back in school, they have a little garden, elsewhere, entire various containers to ensure that you're maximizing the resources that you have. And therefore, it's not just to have in the AC room trying things at this principal ministry, but take it to the field. You know, we're in recent time, we're in a particular constituency, East Portland, and somebody spoke about case, and we want to make it into a university. But it's good for the platform speeches, but it's an important institution if we really want to spread that issue around. We have Nakalva in Hanover. We have Sydney Pagan that the ministry has experimented with in terms of transforming into a STEM academy with the central focus being agriculture. And a lot of these research can take place in those institutions also with the central ministry leading the way. And we protect the quality species for the variety of plants that we have. That is important as we move. Food security is absolutely important. And sometimes we take it for granted. Sometimes when I go back home in South Manchester, where I'm from, the quality of the fruits that you have is not what you used to as a child. And some of the fruits that you used to have, you can't find them anymore because it's just not there as the plants die, and we're not replacing them with the speed that we ought to. And we don't understand that we have a future generation to protect. I know many of us not even replanting. I have never planted a coconut tree, for example. That is in South Manchester. In South Manchester. But each time I go home, you get a plant. You take it for granted that it will always be there. And many persons do that. Right? So I'm saying, I have goat and chicken. But I'm just saying, as a society, sometimes the emphasis on it. And we believe that this does will be sustained and we'll have it over and over. We have to have a deliberate effort to ensure that I plant other fruits, plant like orange and mango and so on. But I speak specifically about the coconut. Right, so I believe, yeah, man. Yeah, and I can take some when I come back here next time. Star apples and so on.
You can get any amount of coconut you want from the Coconut Industry Board and Waterloo.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying I in particular. No, I enjoy it, But I'm just telling you my weakness in terms of the importance of just plant variety, not just one in particular. Well, Mr. President, also we're talking about plant genetics and maintaining quality species and sustainability. The land is important. And what we have been doing consistently is to use good arable agricultural lands for other purposes such like housing. Bernard Lodge is the one that is in the news now. We are now using good quality agricultural land to put into housing. And we are saying, and I'm saying if we continue to do this, then how will we protect the plants and future growth of the plant? Because nutrients important. And the nutrients come primarily from the quality of the land. So we have to really have a policy as to how we protect certain area for certain purposes to sustain that integrated aspect so life is sustainable as we move forward. And good agricultural land must be used, but at times we don't place that emphasis on agriculture and not see the importance of it. So the construction industry will supersede the agricultural sector because it might be a quicker aspect for economic growth and it's more visible and so on. But if we're not sustaining our agricultural industry where the land is critical, then we'll be in trouble as we seek to plan a better way for our future generations. So it's important. And generally speaking, again, the importance of plant, not just for food, but in our own water cycle. It's important, protecting our watershed. So things like deforestation and so on we have to put that in our public education campaign and let our citizens know that if you hurt the environment, you are hurting yourself directly, Mr. President. So all these things are important as we move forward. So in general, we support the bill. When I look at the task force, advisory task force, replacing the management authority, I want to assume, Minister, I think in there that because sometimes management denotes just trying to protect what you have and make it more efficient, but the advisory task force will have a greater scope and ensure that through the research and development, you advise the ministry to ensure that you have the objectives that will be met. You spoke about the farmers being a part of the authority, and I want to ensure that when the minister so appoint that this is really happening, it's primarily through their association, Jamaica Agricultural Society. They have a wealth of experiences. I'm not saying it must be restricted to them primarily, but that's a body that represents farmers well organized across the country, and they have a wealth of knowledge and experiences that can advise technical persons, because sometimes that experience is important as we move forward. And I'm sure there's another point that other colleagues will expand. You know, in the first schedule that we are amending, number 5, that the minister may, if he thinks it's expedient to so do, revoke the appointment of the chairman. I don't know it's coming from the principal act, and that was there, but I mean, if that's the wording, you know. So I know that my colleague senator will also deal with that. But I think we have to look at that. Has to be some criteria. I don't expect. We expect ministers to be honourable persons and not arbitrarily. But that's why I say we expect. Right. And hence, the wording might be within that expectation. But unfortunately, Mr. President, as we have seen in recent times, the expectation and the reality do not necessarily converge. And we have to ensure that the law is clear, and we have ministers that might not act in the best interest based on evidence. They don't arbitrarily use a discretion for their own selfish purposes. So I want us to look at that as we move forward. So in closing, Mr. President, we on this side, I'm sure other persons will point out some issues, but in keeping with the spirit of the debate and passing quality law, when you so highlight issues, it's not because we are disagreeing, but we want the best law for the country. And the recent NITS case demonstrate that we on this side, when we oppose and give alternative, is because we understand the importance of laws, best laws to protect the citizens of the people as we move forward. So hope when we give suggestions, it will be considered in that spirit of passing the best law. Last week, for example, we've made some proposal, and in the interest of the society, we put a hold on that bill. But I don't sure we have to do that this week if we move forward in the interest of the people. If it so pleases, Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Skeffrey. Senator Gill.
Mr. President, thank you, sir. You know, President, following on the heels of the bill last week, which we took some recommendations and I gather we are reviewing. So we're dealing with a very important aspect of an industry that we depend on, and that's our agricultural industry. And in light of concerns for food security, most developing countries have to diversify and make changes and create policies that deals with the changes in the environment if we're going to aspire to grow and to develop our economy. And I want to use this opportunity to commend those who continue to farm, who continue to grow, and those who even aspire to become farmers, and those who are in school who choose agricultural science. Because nowadays we move to the other type of sciences and the mathematics and so. But when you go to a school and you see students in the field, I feel proud. And I also must commend those teachers who pursue and who train and continue to develop these students. Mr. President, in shaping legislation to protect plant varieties, there are some issues and challenges that arise that must be addressed. We have to continue to define new varieties. We have to be able to sustain what we have and give the support. And it's important that in doing this, we take the interests of the stakeholders involved, the interests of the farmers, the interests of the growers, the interests of those who even provide the support like fertilizers. Mr. President, I look at the bill and the role of the management authority. And there are some things that, jump out at me. When I look on the second page, the pursuit of fair agricultural policies and as appropriate, the development and maintenance of diverse farming systems that enhance the sustainable use of agriculture and biological diversity and other natural resources. Now, there are some words that jumps out at me. Fair, appropriate, maintenance, diverse. These are words that triggers certain critical changes. And I want to suggest in doing this, the authority must understand that if you are going to treat with fairness and appropriate and diversity, you cannot do it alone. There has to be consultation with the stakeholders. You have to consult. You have to get down to the root. Literally get down to the root. Because you can't develop policies on your own without taking the interest of those involved. You can't. And so it's important to deal with the stakeholders. The other part is research. Now, as a country, if we're going to compete effectively and efficiently and grow and sustain, we have to invest in our research at all levels. And so research is important to develop, Mr. President, that cutting edge to move from where we are to be able to compete on the global market. And as a developing country, we can't resist the impact of climate change. And so that is where the research comes in to develop varieties of plants that can somehow withstand the impact of climate change. Mr. President, government support is important. Essentially important at all levels. Not only to the farmers, but in those institutions that prepare and develop farmers. The case of this world, I know the Jamaica Agricultural Society intends to stand on its own in the future. But it takes a great deal for an institution of that nature to be able to stand on its own. And it requires it still requires some level of support. Additionally, linkages are important, external linkages with developed countries and the aid and the support that is required. I want to use this opportunity, Mr. President, to commend the minister. We are now shipping mangoes to the United States once again. But I want to ensure that we are doing it while sustaining variety and making changes. Mr. President, this is a very important piece of legislation. This is a very important piece of legislation. A legislation that makes some critical changes to how we operate as a society. I'm very supportive of it. I'm very supportive of the intent and objective of it. And as I've always maintained, that once we pass legislations must be given the necessary support to facilitate the meeting of its objectives. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Gill. Senator Brown.
Mr. President, as Senator Skeffrey has pointed out, the opposition have no problem with the bill. In the main. No, in the main, and with the purpose and objectives. In fact, the principal bill, as I recall, was passed by our administration. And so what we're seeing is a policy difference for the management authority versus the task force. That's your choice. You're in government. Mr. President, 2 points I want to make in respect to the proposed amendment. But before that, I wish to acknowledge that part of the work of the research department must be to continue to explore the link between food, health, and cure for patients. We know sorrel, for example, has been associated with cure for cancer. We know the gungo peas, which can grow freely almost anywhere in the country, have that potential. And I hope we're going to look at these things and encourage the population to plant them, especially plant them in areas that sidewalk, anywhere, but just to plant them because they represent the cure. And maybe, Mr. President, it's a good time just to note a good time but sad passing of a man who spent a lifetime looking at preventing illness, Dr. Vendries, who passed off this week. And I wish to commend him for the tremendous work he has done in pushing better nutrition, pushing the use of our plants and herbs in curing the nation. In terms of the bill, Mr. President, paragraph 11 of the first schedule, the amendment has been made to take out salary and to leave honorarium and fees. However, it says, and such other allowances as the minister may determine. And I think that runs contrary to government policy, that it is the Ministry of the Public Service, Finance and the Public Service, but more so the ministry responsible for the public service that determine honorariums and fees. This would appear to me, as is now, that it is the minister, which is the minister with responsibility for agriculture, who would determine such fees. This may be even in conflict with the PBA, the Public Bodies Management Authority Act and the FAA Act. So I'd urge you to look, Minister, to see whether or not we need that, make an amendment here to say, as may be determined by the Minister with responsibility for the public service, because that is who determines fees and so forth. Unless your government is now changing that policy, but this piece of legislation, this clause 11 as it stands now, is not consistent with that. And yes, and it is my duty when I see that we did something wrong to point it out to you that we need to correct it. But equally when we do good things, like not selling undervalue, like not selling undervalue, I hope you recognize that too. Right? Yes, big value, big value. So Mr. President, that's one, and I urge the Minister to look at that. And if you want to debate out of me, I can. It's Save a Lady with Disability House. And it gives value to the NHT. You will have a chance to speak. You can get up and speak. Mr. President, I now turn to 5 in the first schedule. Because maybe you will speak after I said the things here. The current legislation requires that the minister, if he thinks it expedient, may terminate a board member. Now I ask a question, especially in what I expect to receive on the announcement today, read the UDC land sale. If a board member objects to underselling a property belonging to the people of Jamaica by as much as $6 million US, would that provide, should that be a basis on which a minister, especially one who meddled in the sale, to dismiss? You know, not only press freedom, but Senator Freedom Day to speak. Senator Freedom's Day to speak. So, Mr. President, I'm asking the question. How can it be, how can we be giving ministers such power that are, and against the background of arguments by this government that we want to improve governance and we want to put people of independence on boards? How can we then be saying to minister can terminate any board member as he feels expedient, and not for cause? If a board member become a whistleblower and says, no, there's a secret deal going on, there's a sweetheart deal going on, as we saw reported in the House on Tuesday. If that is happening, if that is the UDC land is a sweetheart deal, make no boats about it. A secret deal hidden from the people of Jamaica, we got it exposed, and the sweetheart deal has now been revealed. And the sweetheart deal has now been revealed. The sweetheart deal has now been revealed.
Mr. President, on a day like today, World Press Freedom Day, when we have all acknowledged the importance of accurate information, and we have also acknowledged the risk inherent in fake and inaccurate information, I ask that the Senator withdraw that. There's nothing as such that can be defined as a sweetheart deal.
What's the point of
Senator Charles, strictly speaking, it is not a point of order.
Maybe it's a point of information.
Okay.
But yes,
Senator Brown, could I ask you please just to stick to the legislation?
Mr. President, let me read what I'm talking about.
Hear what I'm saying?
No, I hear you. And I'm sticking to it.
It does have nothing to do with the bill before us.
It says
We're good. No, but
first schedule of the principle.
Mr. President, Mr. President, Mr. President,
Senator Brown,
another point of order.
Another point of order. I have to hear what he's saying.
Another point of order.
A point of order as to the relevance of this issue, and as we are going down this line, we are going on a misleading line, which is a relevant point of order.
No, not relevant.
Senator Brown, just stick to the thing unless you want the thing to descend into.
No, only you can lead it there.
No,
only
don't
you
say
can
that.
lead it there,
Don't say that.
Mr.
I'm
President,
going to prevent it from,
Mr. President,
leading it
I have
there.
in front of me a bill.
1 minute. Senator Charles.
Mr. President,
What is it?
one of the things that
What
I've
is this?
noted.
Am I not free to speak?
Senator Charles, no.
Am I
Senator
not free
Morris.
to speak?
No, you are not. Senator Morris.
I'm not free to speak, Mr.
Senator
President.
Morris, there is a member on the floor with a point of order.
Mr. President said I'm not free to speak.
Senator Brown, you are free to speak within the guidelines of the standing order. There is a point of order on the floor.
Third point of order without me saying anything.
If it's 20 point of order, I'm entitled and required by the standing orders to hear them. You know that, Senator Brown. You do.
And
Go ahead,
the great concern that we have.
Point of order, Mr. President. A point of order. I'm raising a point of order now to that. I'm raising a point of order.
No, Senator Brown, there's already a point of order on the floor, so you
But
wait
I'm
your
raising a
turn.
point of order to that point of order.
Go ahead, Senator Charles.
You see, it's on one side allowed point
Senator
of order.
Charles, go ahead.
Mr. President, the great concern we have on this side is that the circumvention of our standing orders, when we raise our points of order, what is happening is that Senator Brown, for instance, in his retort, is still using the opportunity to articulate what we... Could you allow me? To articulate exactly what we are asking and what we are identifying as misleading information. We continue to make these utterances that are dangerous utterances. There is no way he can establish the truth of that utterance, and we ask that he refrains from making those kinds of utterances that are misleading, they're untrue, and they're dangerous, particularly on a day like today, World Press Freedom Day. No fake news.
Thank you, Senator.
No fake news.
Thank you, Senator Charles. Senator Morris, you have a point of order?
The member rose and made a point of order, and you ruled. And the member who was speaking on this side, Senator Brown, stood up to speak. And without making any reference to the bill, the member again rose and raised a point of order. And from my knowledge of the standing orders, Mr. President, you can't raise a point of order and the member has not said anything because you as president have already ruled. So, Mr. President, I can't understand what is happening here. So you need to school the member as to what and how to operate with the standing orders. I think it's an abuse of the standing order, Mr. President.
What I would like you to do, Senator Morris, is to use your vast experience to school your member today on the question of relevance.
Mr. President,
Senator
may
Brown,
I continue?
please go ahead.
Mr. President, before us is a bill with a first schedule on the Principal Act which is proposed to amend. Clause 5 in that says as follows. Maybe you haven't read it, so let me read it out aloud. Well, let me read it for the people of the public of the country now. The minister may, if he thinks it's expedient so to do, revoke the appointment of the chairman or any other member of the management authority, no task force, by instrument in writing addressed to the chairman or such other member as the case may be. That is what I am speaking to. Whether or not this legislation should be further amended to say that the minister should not have such a power to terminate.
You're giving an example.
To terminate a member because without cause. Mr. President, will I be allowed to speak freely and to be heard in silence, sir?
let me just get that. Let me just get what is the request, Senator Brown? To speak freely and to be heard in silence.
Yes.
That is the right of every member.
Good.
Every member is entitled to speak freely and to be heard in silence.
Thank you for reaffirming it, sir.
So I'm going to extend that right to you, which is your right.
Thank you, sir.
But recognize that every member in the Senate have the same right. Every one of you.
Good. So let me continue then, Mr. President. Having said that, Mr. President, the issue is, should a board member in today's governance context be subject to removal by the minister without cause? And I say this notwithstanding who make the appointment, because that's not the important factor as to who makes the appointment. The person who serves expects to continue serving. There's a legitimate expectation for that, unless something has gone wrong. And so it is not only Prime Minister and Minister without portfolio is entitled to a second bite. This person, every board member is entitled to a first bite of the cherry. A first bite of the cherry. They too are entitled to natural justice. In other words, the whims and fancy of a politician, of a minister, to terminate a board member because the board member complained, for example, about the underselling of government property, the ripping off of taxpayers, the setting up of sweetheart deals like what happened at the UDC land sale, the exposing of a secret. These are my opinions, and I'm entitled to them. These are my opinions, and I'm entitled to them.
Senator Brown. Senator Brown, it might be your opinion, but there is no rule in the Senate that says that you are entitled to give an opinion to disparage other members of the House, other members of the Senate, or civil servants, and to disparage them in the way that you are going on.
Point of order. Mr. President.
Hold on.
Sir.
Hold on a minute. Hold on. What am I making up?
You're imputing.
That's not what you...
No, Mr. President, it's on a point. Mr. President, I wish to ask the member to withdraw his statement and be struck on a point of order that it is in breach of 35(5) of the standing orders. He is imputing motive to a member of the other house by attributing dishonesty to another member of the house.
There is a standing order.
No, Mr. President, not to mention the fact that we have no proof of any of the facts that he's saying or any counterbalancing issue in the at hand. On top of it, Mr. President, the relevance to the issue of appointment of a chairman under the clause which they designed and they passed in this House in 2013, Mr. President, it is too much. I ask you to withdraw on the matter of Standing Order 35. Cannot impute motive to a member of either House. 35(5) is clear. And you call ministers can only be in either House. Must be withdrawn.
Did you wanted the actual thing?
Senator Brown, I did indicate to you, that you should stick to your contribution to the bill. And I recognize what it is that you are doing. I recognize that. Now, in your presentation, you have made certain allegations concerning improper motive to a member of the other house. And in fact, if it is interpreted correctly, you are making improper motive to a member of this house because the chairman of the UDC is here.
You finished, Mr. President? May I continue? Mr. President, let me make it clear. I have consistently said in this House that in respect to the UDC land sale, I put no blame on the chairman. I've said that over and over, and I repeat it today.
Yeah, but that's not, Senator Brown, that's not
really
the issue.
So the accusation of making...
The issue that I'm raising, right, is that you are imputing improper motive to a member of the other house.
You know, Mr. President.
And the chairman of the UDC who sits here.
Mr. President.
In a way that if it is that you want to debate that aspect of it, then move a motion and let us debate it.
Mr. President,
but
that will
do
come.
not
That will come.
introduce a debate
that will come if
through
you
the
allow
back
the
door.
debate. But what I'm saying is that, in my view, it is improper to terminate a member of a board, because that member of the board may object to the sale of a property for as much as $6 million US.
I understand that. You are not of the view that you should withdraw the statement that you
made
earlier.
Which statement? Which statement?
That is imputing proper motive.
To who? To who?
You did it.
To who?
You tell me who you did it to.
Me must tell you, but you accuse you know better than that. You know better than that. You accuse just be balanced.
Okay, all right. So listen now.
So
listen to this now. Me accuse me if you know better than that. That is where the debate has come to. That is where the debate has come to. Me accuse you some if you know better than that.
That's why you have taken me. May I continue my speech, sir?
No.
What basis am I going to be being prevented from continuing to speak? You're going to stop me from exercising my right to speak in this debate?
No, I'm going to stop you from exercising your right or your lack of right to address the members of the Senate with the use of offensive and insulting language. To me,
what is insulting to you?
Just what you said earlier.
Well, I withdraw that, sir. I withdraw those remarks, sir.
And I would like you to move on by also withdrawing the remarks that you used to impute improper motive to other members of the House.
You know, Mr. President. Mr. President, let me make it clear to you. It's your ruling. When Audley Shaw described a sale of Ocean Hotel as a sweetheart deal.
A point of order.
As a sweetheart deal.
A point of order. No, let's stop. You know why I have to stop it, Mr. President?
No, please.
And why I'm speaking like this?
1 minute, please.
Mr. President, the reason is,
Charles.
Mr. President, that what has happened.
I'm not interested in what Audley Shaw said. I'm interested in what is happening here today. That's what I'm interested in. So I'm going to advise you just to proceed and complete or continue your presentation. He has withdrawn it.
Mr. President, I use one example about why a member shouldn't be removed from our board without cause. I don't need to stick on that. The country will read, and we will get in the Senate report later on, and we can all draw our own conclusions. But I could move on to say, Mr. President, a member objects to the meddling of people outside our board in fixing decision for the board. And that person objects to it. And that person shouldn't be fired from the board without being given a chance for natural justice. I see others say people must get 2 bites of the cherry. The board members, whoever they are, under whichever administration, should at least get 1 bite of the cherry. Even half a bite of the cherry before they are removed. Because we know that some politicians, some ministers are meddlers. We know that from history. We saw, Mr. President, in Belize, ministers sold lands below value, despite the objection of people on board in Belize. And the Caribbean Court of Justice, in a celebrated case, found that those ministers were wrong and should pay back the money. Why should a board member be terminated for that, for such a situation? So I come to clause 5 here saying we should move an amendment that not leave it to the feeling of expediency on the part of the minister, but to cause something being done wrong by the board member. Because that board member is put there to defend the public. The board member is appointed by the Agricultural Society, for example. Maybe by the Cannabis Growers Association. and object to some policy decision. We are talking about independence and governance of board. But we're saying here that minister must have the right to just fire them willy-nilly as he sees it or she sees expedient. We need to move beyond that in this era of governance. We need to recognize that even the IMF have been complaining about corruption. International agencies have been complaining about corruption. And so because people ball out against corruption,
And the board must protect the nation.
they are fired even though we have a whistleblower act, a protective disclosure act. So the point I'm making here at 5,
Good point.
I know they don't like it.
Good point.
They don't like it. But the reality is, we must move beyond the whims and fancy of politicians, of ministers.
And you're focused on the bill.
And if anything tell us how wrong that is, and yes, I voted for it, but no, I vote against it because mine eyes have seen the wrongs. Mine eyes have seen the report of the Contractor General. My eyes have seen the report of the Contractor General, and it leads me to say that this clause needs to be amended. Your majority will defend it. Your majority will defend it. But no matter what you do, you can't rub out the fact that in Lambert Brown's view, a sweetheart deal was struck. May it please you, Mr. President. At UDC, that is.
Mr. It is my usual seat, sir, and so I don't need to ask you your permission. Mr. President, you know, when I looked at this bill, I came here this morning believing that there would not be much controversy. And in fact, in the opening from the leader of government business, that comment was made. But then we have seen what we have seen. We have seen what we have seen this morning. You know? Mr. President, this amendment is one which basically is quite simple and straightforward, and it's an administrative amendment, but an administrative amendment made to a very important bit of legislation. And what I want to commend the Minister and the Ministry of Industry, Commerce and Agriculture and Fisheries is that, and as we have heard from other speakers this morning, this particular legislation deals with one touching on food security, which is very important. Very important. Because, Mr. President, food security is one which speaks to the health of a nation and its people. And it is one where, although Jamaica is not ideally where it would want to be in that regard, it is one which we have set as a goal in our 2030 vision to make Jamaica the place to live, work, do business, and raise families. Mr. President, I take note of the particular bill that we have before us, and clause 6 in particular, which speaks to the work and functions of the advisory task force. But you know, we need to look on agriculture in a very broad way and how we can achieve the desired goals in this country. And some persons have touched on it before. I won't go too much into it, but we've heard about the need to have agricultural education. Mr. President, when I attended Cornwall College many years ago, it was one of those subjects that almost every student, once you got to third form, and that's what we call it, you call it what, ninth grade now? Although it was a school located in an urban area, that we had to participate in agricultural science. And not only participate in it in a theoretical way, but there had to be practical, hands-on experience which was taught to the students at that time. Mr. President, if you go throughout the schools, the secondary institutions in Jamaica, you may find it difficult to see that topic as being one of those on the criteria. And, you know, what I think it will also do is to attract the youngsters, and particularly the boys, because they like to have hands-on experience and they tend to gravitate to those subjects and disciplines that have a practical component to it. So it is something that I think we need to look at, start from basics and from when the kids are young, because we can cultivate a mindset, Mr. President, from an early stage in our youngsters to participate in farming and to be radical and innovative at the same time. And they can take that approach going into the tertiary institutions. Comments have been made about those, and I won't make any further comment on that. Improvements in our laboratory facilities for research in areas of tissue culture, genetics, biotechnology, and microbiology to avoid diseases, develop strains and varieties of crops and livestock that are resilient. And as I touch upon livestock, Mr. President, in going through the same agricultural course that I would have done in secondary school, we learn about the development of the cattle industry in Jamaica, and in particular, the Jamaica Red Hook. And from a reading that I've seen recently, that we have lost a lot in that regard. And when you look on the linkages that have been spoken about, the development of the hotel industry, the expansion of hotels and the number of visitors that come to our country. And we ask, why can't our farmers participate in a more meaningful way? We hear about quantities and quality. And I think we need to ensure that our labs are up and running and working to develop more resilient plants and also livestock. Improvements in our agronomic principles and methodologies. And I raise this, Mr. President, to address comments made by Senator Skeffrey. Because if we promote more widely the incorporation of increased technology into farming practices through precision agriculture, Mr. President, it is highly possible that we can have improved yields per acre and less wastage from disposal of contaminated and spoiled produce. Because land space is limited. There is competition in land space and the use for available lands in this country. And Senator Skeffrey spoke about Bernard Lodge. But I wanted us to point out that if we are able to use the limited land space, or smaller land space, but we can increase the yields per acre, then it can compensate, because we have to have that balance. We have to find that balance, because housing is also important. Development is also important. And so I'm certain that in the review that the Honourable Prime Minister has asked for in relation to Bernard Lodge, those are some of the things that will eventually come out, Senator Skeffrey. And so I don't want you to, for whatever it is worth, political advantage, political commentary, to bring about a scare tactic. What happened to the farmers, as if the lands were being taken away from farmers in Bernard Lodge. That is definitely not so. And as I said, in respect to consultation and in respect to how we can go about improving yields per acre, it is something that we can find the right balance. Because, Mr. President, I looked on a report that came out of the Bodle's Research Unit. And in respect to cassava, right at this present moment, what we have in relation to cassava is the production of 9 to 19 tons per hectare. But with new technologies, and this is what is coming out of our local representatives in that particular unit, it is said that it is potentially possible to have yields per acre and hectare increase to 70 tons per hectare. So with the new technologies and approaches that we need to develop, it is possible that we can use less land space, and so we can strike that necessary balance between agriculture, what is used for agriculture, and what will have to be used for an increase in population in respect to housing and other types of development. So I want to suggest to Senator Skeffrey, let us look on the review that is being done and to see where we can strike that balance, but encourage the persons that are involved in farming, in ministry, that we must look on improving the technologies and the approaches that we have for agriculture. Mr. President, we must provide more technical persons at RADA. Very critical, because just out of a Gleaner report in 2015, Mr. President, the ratio that was reported there said that it is one extension officer to 2,300 farmers. Cannot be ideal. Cannot be ideal. And you know, if we are able to increase that ratio, Mr. President, for persons who have the technical skills and ability to go out and impart to our farmers better understanding in the science behind animal breeding, hydroponics, and greenhouse technology, I am certain that our situation will be much improved. Mr. President, whilst we do all of that, the comment needs to be made in respect to, and our farmers were congratulated, commended by Senator Gale. But our farmers suffer a lot in this country from predatory larceny. Predatory larceny is that being, well, there you go, Senator Morrison. And you know, for those who continue in farming, they must be highly commended. Mr. President, a report that I saw in preparing for this presentation says to us in Jamaica we have annual losses to predatory larceny exceeding $6 billion each year. Our law enforcement and other stakeholders need to be sensitized that issue must be treated with greater seriousness. All possible measures for detection must be encouraged. So when we look on the various agencies that can assist in the entire process, the public health, Mr. President, public health, the food inspectors who we spoke about in the debate last week, they must be very vigilant while doing food inspections right across the board, whether in supermarkets, in the butcher shops, wherever it is that they have to visit in performing their duties. The local authorities, of which I am a part, that operate markets and slaughterhouses, we must be proactive to ensure that we look out for the possibility of predatory larceny to protect the farmers that we have and so encourage others to go into farming. Mr. President, there was a presentation by the Honourable Christopher Tufton when he was the Minister of Agriculture in 2010-2011 sectoral debate. And from that time, there were studies that were done in respect to establishing regional abattoirs. Where is that now, Mr. President? It was again raised in 2015 when the Honourable Roger Clark was the Minister of Agriculture. We are now in 2019. We need to dust off those reports. We need to have engagement with the local authority for the establishment of regional abattoirs at the very least, because that is a way that we can reduce the possibilities of predatory larceny taking place, especially in relation to animal rearing. Our judges, Mr. President, and it is something that I experience, our judges in the parish courts, if it is not the typical crime of assault, murder, or as the case may be, municipal matters, matters which touch upon predial larceny, it does not get the priority, and it is not given the significance that it needs to be given. And so our judges need to impose the sanctions that they must, and our legislators, ourselves, the policymakers, in effect, the government, Mr. President, must look on the possibility of amending the appropriate legislation to increase the fines significantly as a deterrent to persons who would want to participate. Our consumers must be more discerning and not just purchase willy-nilly from any vendor. Mr. President, my last comment in relation to this particular bill, and it is a hot-button topic. How will this bill, how will this act that is being amended by this bill impact the cannabis industry? How will it? There are questions that I would want to ask from it, because I was looking at a GIS report in 2018. Comments which were made by the Honourable Andrew Wheatley when he was the Minister of Science, Energy and Technology. And he spoke about Jamaica's, the strains of marijuana that we have. It's not food. Well, some people may say it is brain food. Right, Senator Horton? I saw a picture of you the other day, and it seems that you were participating in that type of food. Can't be a point of order. It is a real picture. Mr. President, at the time, the Honourable Andrew Wheatley said, the country must take its claim on all local strains of marijuana for research and development. Jamaica, he says, has the best or finest marijuana strains in the world, which include the Jamaican's lamb breath, or they call it lamb's bread. No, it's not Lambert. It's certainly not Lambert. Lamb's breath or lamb's bread. I will ask Senator Horton to tell me which one it is, because he's referred to one also called Marley's Cali. The Honourable Minister at the time said, Mr. President, it is like our birthright, and we cannot allow persons from outside to come and take away our birthright. He went on to disclose that there is one country that is in possession of all our indigenous strains and is doing research on all of them. We have to position ourselves. We have to take on the mantle and do what we have to do as it relates to medicinal marijuana research. And so this particular act speaks about the need for research, the development of strains and so forth, plant genetics. And so I ask the question, especially the fact that we have a lot of small farmers that want to participate in the whole process of the cannabis industry and the development of the marijuana industry. And this also, Mr. President, can be a big game changer to the economic fortunes of Jamaica and Jamaicans. So then, the question that I ask is, how will this particular legislation advance the small ganja farmers that have been promised a space in the industry, so they will not be shunted aside but will achieve the benefits of research in plant biotechnology and agricultural methods? Mr. President, how will the ministry ensure the conservation and protection of the indigenous strains of cannabis from exploitation by others and or depletion by hybridization and cross-pollination, and ensure that they remain available for future learning and medical research and development? Those are some of the questions which come to mind when I review this bill. And I trust that some future time the answers will be forthcoming. Mr. President, I thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation. And although we expected it not to have been controversial without Senator Brown, I don't know. He has a particular knack, regardless of what we speak about. Rancor. No, you can't. You can't. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I just wish to thank colleagues for having...
Sorry. Thank you, Senator Sinclair. Minister, thank you. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was traveling.
In his mind. Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, just to thank colleagues for again emphasizing a truth which we hold to be self-evident, and that is in Jamaica the importance of farming, the importance of agriculture, the importance of our farmers and agriculturalists to Jamaica, to Jamaicans, to food security as a whole. I think it's important to note that there is, in fact, some amazing work that is being done at the Bodles Research Center. So we not only have to look back historically at the wonderful agronomists like T.P. Leckie who developed the Jamaica Red Pole, which was so groundbreaking and recognized internationally. But at the banana breeding station, for example, we have over 100 varieties of bananas and plantains now, and their tolerance to diseases. We have we've produced again at Bodles the Bodles Globe pumpkin, which is where we worked with an international entity to ensure that it is virus resistant. As we have also with plummy tomatoes, we've developed a plummy tomato strain that is resistant to the Jerry curl virus. Did you know about that, Mr. President? I am just learning about that virus. But to know that we're doing serious scientific work that will help, of course, Jamaica's food security. We've expanded on seed storage and quality testing to house seeds for climate resilience. And the Research and Development Division has conserved fruit tree varieties of over 60 species, as well as local sweet potatoes, germplasms, over 25 types, Mr. President. And we can note that Minister Shaw recently spoke about the fruit tree program, where the intention of the government is to plant 5 million trees, fruit trees. Yes. So I know Senator Skeffrey will be happy to hear this. 5 million fruit trees over 5 years. Yes. So the committee is in place now, which is seeking to finalize the research and the agreement on the particular strains which are to be planted and rolled out to, of course, ensure food security, climate resilience, and, of course, with respect to our soil fertility and those other matters that we always have to take into consideration. So, Mr. President, land use, soil use, we're in fact now currently in working. The Ministry of responsible for agriculture is working with support of Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade to have international support around our soil analysis, soil research, to ensure that the fertility of our soils across the island are optimized. And this again, it goes ultimately towards food security and a scientific approach to agriculture, making sure that we can get the best out of our lands. Mr. President, as indicated previously, the bill is about changing the structure of the management of research and development as provided for under the Principal Act, the Protection of Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture Act. And it is therefore proposed, Mr. President, that we now move to committee to discuss the clauses of the Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. The question is that the bill be read for a second time. Those in favor? Against?
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Protection of Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture Act, read a second time.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The Senate will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate to consider the bill clause by clause. Thank you very much. I put clause 1 of the act. Those in favor of the bill, I'm sorry. Against? Ayes have it. I put clause 2. Those in favor? Against? I put clause 3. Those in favor? Against? I put clause 4. Those in favor? Against? I put clause 5. Those in favor? Against? I put clause 6.
Yes, Mr. President.
I put clause 6.
Clause 6, Mr. President, I have a comment which I want to be clear. An amendment was proposed for 11 of the first schedule. And I wish to know whether or not the amendment about the minister with responsibility for the public service determining the fees and honorarium and other allowance, whether that is acceptable to the, being accepted by the government. Yeah, but the
This is a usual provision. It was passed in 2013 with, in the context of the authority as it was designed. So far as I understand, it is that the minister would be operating within the normal construct of the law, and the normal procedures for approval of how these honoraria and fees are determined. We're removing salary because salary is no longer an option because we're not creating a separate entity, but otherwise it was not intended to change the policy treatment under the first schedule as put out here.
Am I to understand, Mr. Chairman, that the minister is giving us an assurance that the Minister of Agriculture, or the Minister with responsibility for agriculture, will not set honorariums and fee for the task force other than by consultation and agreement with the minister responsible for the public service? Because that, let me finish, please. Let me finish. Because that is what I understand the policy of the government ought to be, that's what I understand we did the last time. And so, if here it escapes and put the onus on the Minister of Agriculture, that ought not to be the case. And so, I want to know if we're being assured that the Minister of Agriculture will not act other than with the authority of the minister responsible for the public service. Because that's important to the country in terms of our governance, if ministers can now freely set rates.
The practice, Mr. President, as all should be aware who have any experience within the public sector, is that ministers are bound by the circulars issued by the Ministry of Finance, which address these matters. There is nothing in here that changes that. There's no intention to change that practice, and accordingly, there is no need to make any amendment or for me to give any assurance beyond recognizing that the current practice remains the same.
Thank you. So I put clause.
Just a moment. I think the reasoning is pretty simple. That it is a desirable practice, but there can be deviation from practice. And what is being recommended is that close the loophole which allows for deviation and then make it be a substantive provision in the law. Now, I don't see how that could be resisted, because if it is that it is being said that the practice that now obtains is desirable, then that is a reason the more so why we should legislate that practice. Because what we have observed from time to time is that there is developing a practice to move away from that which is the established practice. And when that movement takes place, it affects the whole issue of governance and raises issues as to whether or not the non-observance of the practice is as a result of some corrupt act. And if we are serious about closing these loopholes, then whenever the opportunity arises, we should so do. If we don't, then we are making a mockery of sincerity.
Mr. President, if I may just indicate that there is in fact not a loophole to be closed in this matter because it's in fact more than a practice. It is that the FAA provides for ministers and ministries to be bound by circulars from the Ministry of Finance. So it's not necessary, Mr. President. I don't think we need to be detained by this.
Chairman, my comments were made in the context of accepting that which the leader of government business had said as being the correct position, having regard to the fact that I misjudged the correctness of the position that was articulated, and that indeed there is a law which governs it, unlike what I had been told that there's a practice. If that now is emanating from the legal people in whom I have the greatest confidence, then the suggestion will not be pursued. If it is a bar-like interpretation of what the legal officers have said.
You mean bill?
Bill bar. if it is an interpretation of what the legal officers have said, regrettably, I would stick with the position that I had, because the certitude with which I would accept the opinion of the legal officers is not accorded elsewhere.
Mr. President, as I indicated, the guidance is that the FAA applies, and we're so guided, and therefore we need not be detained on this particular point.
Mr. You're going to go.
I now accept that the legal officers have spoken, and that is now a part of the record of the proceedings. And so if it turns out not to be so, then there's a consequence.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, since I raised the issue, and I've gotten that explanation on the record, and since answered is often plead in aid in resolving these issues. I'm comfortable because at least I've gotten that from the minister saying that there'll be no determination by the Minister of Agriculture without reliance on the ministry responsible for the public service. And I'm comfortable with that. I also, Mr. President, another amendment which is at 5. Yeah. The minister may, if he thinks it expedient to do so.
Didn't we accepted clause 5 already? You want to
No, we never did. Never did. We just
same clause 6.
Same clause 6. Sorry. I know you had come back from traveling, Mr. President, so it probably
Senator
was
Brown,
miswhiled.
just go ahead and do what you do.
I know, but you had told us you're traveling.
Just go ahead and do what you do.
Yeah, you had told us you're traveling. I know you're back now, so I just want to be off you.
You weren't here. You weren't here earlier to know why it is I'm testy. Senator Knight. And if you were downstairs and watching the television, you would have known why I'm testy. And yes, I'm testy.
President has gotten testy over the sweetheart deal thing. That's what you're doing, President?
Chairman.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised, President.
Chairman, may I just say that
Senator Brown.
But no, I'm not
Senator
Minister.
Cavan, Gale, and myself, we were downstairs he had a cup of coffee, I had a cup of tea. And may I just say that we had it without sugar. And we heard what had happened.
Senator Brown, thank you, Senator Knight. Senator
No,
Brown.
He's not finished. He's not finished.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Don't be testy with me, President Chairman.
With me.
And we heard what's taking place in the chamber here. And we felt it was a very robust debate. That is how we interpreted it. We did not at all believe that anybody was testy or anybody was upset.
Well, your interpretation would have been different from mine, but maybe it was your tea.
Senator Brown, go ahead, please.
They are giving you trouble, Mr. President. I want to side with you, President. Because it seems...
Me?
Yeah, I want to side with you. They seems to be giving you trouble. I want to side with you. Can't I side with you even once in the sitting? Mr. President, the amendment I propose at 5 in the schedule is that the minister may... But I want your attention. I don't want it to be this... No, but I want the president's attention because I must speak to you, Chairman, in this case. I'm straight to speak to you. I need your undivided attention. Because I don't want... Wait, not for the president talking to Ms. Curtis. Yes, thank you for your undivided attention. I'm proposing at 5. I'm proposing at 5, Chairman, that the minister may, if cause exists, revoke the appointment of the chairman or other member of the task force. So we would delete "he thinks it expedient so to do" and replace it "if cause exists." So it would be the minister may, if cause exists, revoke the appointment of the chairman or other member of the task force, whatever.
Good. Thank you very much, Senator Brown. You have heard the proposed amendment. Those in favor? Aye. Against? No. I put clause 6. I put clause 6. Those in favor? I put clause 6. Those in favor? I put the title and an acting clause. I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Just to say thank you very much for the members of the technical staff who appear to be leaving. Have a good day. Have a good weekend. Minister.
Mr. President, I ask for third reading of the bill.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Protection of Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture Act, read a third time and passed.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. The question is that the item designated announcements be recommitted. Those in favor? Against? Announcements, Madam Clerk.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following. Annual report of the Universal Service Fund for the year 2017-2018. Annual report of the e-Learning Jamaica Company Limited for the year 2017-2018. Auditor General's Performance Audit Report on the JCF's procurement management. Annual report of the Integrity Commission for the year 2017. The Integrity Commission's special report on review of complaint received regarding sale of rooms on the beach by Montego Beach 1975 Limited to Puerto Caribe Properties Limited, and the sale of beachlands by the Urban Development Corporation to Puerto Caribe Properties Limited. And the Jamaica Gazette Supplement, Proclamations, Rules and Regulations, Volume 142, number 42, enclosing the Emergency Powers Regulations 2019 under the Emergency Powers Act.
Thank you very much. Minister.
Generally, we would get hard copies of these documents that are tabled. I haven't seen any table today. What's the situation?
Thank you. Let me inquire. Madam Clerk, you have hard copies of these? Senator Morris, what the clerk is saying that normally they are uploaded. There was a time when normally you get the hard copy anyway, and we need to have it.
No, but hold on.
Mr. President, Mr. President, if I may, you know, just listen, because I do recall distinctly that when...
Why you bother the president? President says slow. He said wait because...
What are you guys...
Senator Knight. Sorry, Senator Sinclair. What I'm informed is this. The practice has developed recently where normally the reports are uploaded onto the site, and if you wish a hard copy, it will be provided by the Parliament. But what they are saying is that over the years, the experience is that they are printing them and people just leave them on the desk.
Well, I understand that. But I may be wrong. But my save the trees, and you put your plastic bags on, anyway. My understanding, subject to correction, is that there is no provision in the standing orders for electronic service of these documents, but there is a provision in the standing orders which says that members are entitled to these documents. So soon as there's an amendment which changes my entitlement, then I will abide. But as it is now, that to which I am entitled as a senator to assist me to carry out my task, I want. I need for it. Yeah, I need it.
Very well, Senator Knight. It will be provided. 1 minute, Senator Charles.
I just want to draw the Senate's attention to the no implied restrictions clause in the standing order. which says that except so far as is expressly provided, these rules shall in no way restrict the mode in which the Senate may exercise and uphold its powers, privileges, and immunities. And so, though it may not be specifically spoken to, there is a particular custom which is beneficial in several ways to both houses that has been adopted, and that could very well be the reason why
this doesn't really require a long debate. You know, the minister said he would like a hard copy of the report, and it will be provided to him.
That's correct. I want the hard copy. I don't want any argument. I want the hard copy. That's it.
And he's entitled to it.
Let me work that. And Mr. President, as Mr. President, as one who has championed the disclosure of this report and to move it from the state of secrecy to the public, to transparency for the public, I wish to clarify, since it doesn't say it here, which are the reports we're getting? Is it the July 2018 report of the Contractor General? Mr. President, I'm asking a question here, you know. And I think you should at least have the courtesy of allowing me to finish my question. Is it the July 2018 report of the Contractor General that is tabled here, or is there some altered report that is being presented to us? So I want to know, yes, and I use the word deliberately, whether it is an altered report or it is a report of the July 2018.
I'm not even going down that road. Minister, I am not. Senator Brown, please. You read what is said there, and that is what is reported.
What is said here, Mr. President? The Integrity Commission Special Report and review of the complaint received regarding sales of rooms on the beach by Montego Beach 1975 Limited to Puerto Caribe Properties Limited, and the sale of beach lands by the, or was it giveaway of beach lands, by the Urban Development Corporation.
1 minute.
To Puerto
Senator
Caribe.
Senator Brown, that is exactly what is tabled. Minister?
So what I'm trying to find out is whether or not, Mr. President, Mr. President, what I'm trying to find out, which report we're getting?
On a point of order, Mr.
Which report we're getting? Which report we're getting?
Mr. President, no, there's no other business, Mr. President, but I just want to be clear, because apart from the fact that, you know, from the all day, Mr. President, this Senator Brown has been imputing motive to all and sundry, whether they are members of other house or otherwise.
On a point of order, Mr. President, on a point of order.
Senator Brown, she's on a point of order.
Yes, but I'm on too. I'm on a point. She's imputing motive, improper motive to me.
Minister,
she's imputing improper motive to me.
Deliberately, which means he means to
impute
motive.
Sold the country short.
Minister, do you have any other business doing today? Minister, you have any other business doing today?
Mr. President.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
Mr. Morris, go ahead, please, sir.
Yeah, I heard the discussion about the tabling of the documents, and I figure that we are going in a new epoch in terms of getting documents electronically, based on what is said.
Sorry, Senator Morris, I'm informed, you don't need to detain us, I'm informed that there are 10 copies which were, quote, upstairs. They are being brought here immediately, so we'll get them. Okay?
Yeah, but I mean, separate and apart from that, Mr. President, separate and apart from that, and I appreciate that, but the point that I'm making is a specific point, because if it is that in the future we are going to be sending the documents electronically, I would want to be assured that they will be sent to me or sent to us in the appropriate format. No, but Mr. President, when they are sent, I get an email which is with the general mail and with the general documents. And I don't understand it. Let me tell you something, Mr. President. And I hear some members making reference. I'm not going to be muzzled by anybody in this Senate. All right? I have a right to speak because it has happened here before.
Senator Morris, who is muzzling you?
No, Mr. President. Not you, Mr. President.
I would never sit here and allow anybody to muzzle you,
Mr.
man.
President,
Don't say that, man.
You and I have worked. You and I work very well. It's not you, Mr. President. My reference is nothing. But there are some members, Mr. President, who, when individuals speak,
I agree with you. Senator Brown, allow Senator Morris to finish. Because every time people are talking, you are the one that is interrupting them.
Yes. Mr. President, I'm on my feet.
No, but President, that just accused me wrongly. I don't know this testy and it has gotten too far.
No, but Mr. President.
But look at this. Senator Morris, go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, the point was that when the mail is sent, it is sent in general to all members.
Yes.
And sometimes those documents are scanned documents, and it wouldn't work for me. So I am asking that we adhere to the agreement.
Senator Morris. Minister?
Minister Charles.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is not intended to do any further business today. I ask that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed.
The question is that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. All in favor? Against? Honourable Senate now stands adjourned.
Well, I never thought we could have this kind of behavior. All right, that's amazing. Yeah, my brother. You remember last week? How it was peaceful?
There's a long-distance relay that's still on. Many have taken it this far, each leg as important as the next, each challenge faced with determination. Now it's your turn to take the baton. People living with HIV and AIDS and those who are vulnerable need your commitment. It stands in the way of a better quality of life for all of us and our self-respect as a region. It stands in the way of victory in the fight to stop the spread of HIV. Reject stigma and discrimination. Get us to zero.
Watch PBCJ's live coverage of the sectoral debates 2019. This May, the public debate in the House of Representatives between cabinet ministers, junior ministers, and their opposing colleagues heats up. You don't want to miss it. The ministers are expected to present their achievements to date and their projections for the new fiscal year. On the flip side, the opposition spokespersons on various portfolios will seek answers about government programs and policies. Remember, the sectoral debates happening Tuesdays and Wednesdays, May 1 to May 22. Brought to you live on PBCJ, the People's Station.
When I got him, I didn't really know what to do. So I was putting him on my breast, and I instantly fell in love when I put him on my breast. I was looking straight into his eyes, and he was just looking at me, and he was there, and he was looking for the breast. And she was like, "Oh, your nipples will be sore." But my son had no problem latching. He just latched. And I've always, you hear stories people like, "Oh, my baby didn't latch properly and my nipples were hurting me." But for me, it wasn't like that. But what happened was, I'm here breastfeeding him inside NICU, but my breast is hurting me, but there's nothing coming. So I started to sit down and I was like, why is there nothing coming? And I said, no, there's nothing coming. She's like, yeah, we're coming. Just keep doing it. She was really encouraging me to continue. And I remember turning to her and I said to her, do not, under any circumstances, give my child any formula. I do not want my child to have any formula because I'm like, I want to breastfeed my baby. I just want to.
It's Friday, May 3. This is the news on PBCJ. I am Simone Absalom. Minister of Health, Dr. Christopher Tufton, is encouraging persons to get immunized against diseases such as measles, as non-action can have severe impact on the population. The minister, who was delivering the keynote address at a national immunization fair held at the Spanish Town Prison Oval in St. Catherine, said immunization is not only a personal issue, but also a duty and responsibility for community and country. Jamaica remains on high alert in the wake of an outbreak of measles in several countries. The United Nations Children's Fund says an estimated 169 million children worldwide missed out on the first dose of the vaccine for the highly contagious disease between 2010 and 2017. Head of Independent Commission of Investigations, INDECOM, Terence Williams, welcomes the decision to shut down the Mobile Reserve. He is quoted in the Jamaica Observer saying, "We have repeatedly pointed out the deficiencies in leadership, accountability and control of the Mobile Reserve." End quote. A release from the Minister of National Security, Dr. Horace Chang, yesterday announced that the Mobile Reserve will be disbanded. It said a new-look special police unit should be operational by the end of this year as part of major changes being implemented in the Jamaica Constabulary Force, the JCF. The INDECOM boss says authorities should consider issuing rules for the use of force for the JCF and the JDF, as well as the correctional services. Rules, he says, that will ensure that they have the right human rights framework in which they use force. Security consultant and former Deputy Commissioner of Police, Mark Shields, who in 2016 called for the disbanding of the Mobile Reserve, also welcomes the announcement by Chang. The spotlight has been turned on the Mobile Reserve since last Sunday, when news broke that 3 of the cops allegedly involved in the shooting incident that left 3 persons, including 1 member of the JCF, dead, were based at that unit. The vehicle the 3 were traveling in was also assigned to the Mobile Reserve, while 3 of 5 guns found in the car the cops were traveling in, plus license plates, all belonged to the JCF. A U.S. official assigned to the Jamaica Constabulary Force to improve its forensic capabilities has ended his contract early, stating he has become frustrated. The contract of Craig Dower, forensic evidence advisor with the U.S. Embassy in Kingston, ends in October, but he has opted to leave the job next week. Mr. Dower said the JCF has no desire to change, adding that he has submitted scores of reports for developing forensic capabilities in the force, but very little has been done. He noted that while DNA samples have been taken and analyzed, they have to be stored because there is no DNA database in Jamaica, despite the DNA Evidence Act being passed 3 years ago. Mr. Dower was speaking Thursday afternoon on RJR's Hotline program. The government intends to stick to its current macroeconomic policy in order to protect and build on the gains attained to date. That assurance from Prime Minister Andrew Holness. He argued that any reversal or diversion from the policy could jeopardize prospects for the nation's economic security and independence. The Prime Minister was speaking at a media briefing at the office of the Prime Minister on Tuesday to announce an additional $140 million loan from the World Bank.
The gains that we have made can easily be reversed if we were to ever start to fool around, tinker with, or try to in any way change what the people of Jamaica, the unions, the banks, everybody, the private sector, the public sector, have worked so hard to gain. Let us not start this conversation about trying to change policy. Let us stick with what we have seen work. Let us cement it in, and then let's move on to other things, such as becoming resilient as a country to protect the gains that we have.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Holness during Tuesday's briefing said that the administration is mindful and proactive against any risks that could disturb our currently good trajectory. He indicated that the government, through the Finance and Public Service Ministry, has been working with the international development partners such as World Bank to craft financial instruments that will protect Jamaica against weather-related events, among other risks. Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett has lauded the bill for the tourism workers' pension scheme. This was one of the main planks from his contribution to the sectoral debate on Tuesday.
The long-awaited tourism workers' pension bill has been tabled. And this is a game changer, Mr. Speaker, for the workers, and represent not just a historic development in the Caribbean, but in the world. Because, Mr. Speaker, this will become the only destination in the world that has a comprehensive pension plan for every single worker in the sector called tourism. This will make us, Mr. Speaker, a world leader in providing tourism social security. Already, Mr. Speaker, we have been getting inquiries from other nations about our revolutionary pension plan. The commitment, Mr. Speaker, to this pension plan began in 2008.
The bill has been tabled in the House of Representatives and will soon be debated.
It came about because in December, every year we go and have breakfast with the Red Caps and with the immigration workers and the airport staff in general. And I went to Norman Manley, Mr. Speaker, and I saw this Red Cap. He was 78 years old. And he had been doing the job for 48 years. And I said to him, why are you still out here? He told me about his children and grandchildren and so on. And he said to me, I can't leave because if I leave here, I will not have anything to eat afterwards. And I resolved in my mind then that we must have a pension plan for the workers of the tourism industry.
Speaking at a post-sectoral debate press conference at the office of the Prime Minister on Wednesday, Minister Bartlett said the bill will benefit all who work in the tourism industry, including those who are on the brink of retirement within the next 5 years. Mr. Bartlett said $1 billion has already been set aside to assist people who are now registered within the 5-year period for retirement who will not meet some requirements of the scheme. Mr. Bartlett said the tourism workers' pension scheme is in keeping with the government's focus on creating a social security network within the tourism sector. Opposition Senator Floyd Morris has called for the education system to be more accessible to students with disabilities. Speaking recently at the launch of Dr. Charmaine Gooden-Monteith's book, Inclusion of Students with Special Needs in the Regular Classroom, at the Jamaica Teachers Association's offices on Church Street in Kingston recently, Morris said he believes that the education system is closed to persons with incapacities. In the book, Gooden-Monteith highlighted the challenges, opportunities, and issues in several countries where the implementation of inclusive policies take place. According to Morris, the Child Find program, which is a legal requirement that schools find all children who have disabilities and who may be entitled to special education services, has pointed out just over 4,000 children with disabilities that are in the education system in Jamaica. Newly elected Member of Parliament for Portland Eastern, Anne-Marie Vaz, says she will be donating her first month's salary as a Member of Parliament to start a tertiary fund in her constituency. Vaz, who is a founder and director of the One Jamaica Foundation, said the details of how people can apply to receive assistance will be disclosed at a later date, as she urged those who supported her vision as caretaker to join her in this venture. The current salary for a non-executive member of parliament is just under $300,000 per month. Vaz has meanwhile committed to continuing to seek donations to bolster the fund. These scholarships will be focused on specialized studies that can help to build the constituency in hospitality and tourism, skills training, computer sciences, among other things. At the same time, Vaz said that she has many other plans for the constituency that will create opportunities for the youth to maximize their potential and have access to the opportunities that can change their lives. In regional news, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has made a public appearance flanked by soldiers at an army base in Caracas in a show of defiance towards his opponents. Mr. Maduro called for the armed forces to defeat any coup attempt. This followed 2 days of clashes between opposition and pro-government forces. Opposition leader Juan Guaido has urged public employees to strike to undermine the government. In Trinidad and Tobago, the state's cooperating witness in the ongoing corruption investigation into former Attorney General Arnand Ramlogan, SC, and opposition Senator Gerald Ramdeen has struck a deal over his role in the legal fees kickback scam. Up to Thursday, both men were still in police remand. The plea bargain agreement for Jamaican-born British counsel Vincent Nelson was revealed by the Director of Public Prosecutions Roger Gaspard SC, as Nelson was hit with 3 conspiracy charges Thursday. Nelson is accused of fraudulent conspiracy with Ramlogan and Ramdeen. National Security Minister Stuart Young spoke of the plea agreement at the Weekly Post cabinet press briefing.
Is actually the utilization of the plea bargaining legislation that was recently passed by the Parliament and driven by this government. So Vincent Nelson did enter into a plea bargaining process, and my understanding is he was formally charged, he has pleaded guilty, entered into a plea bargaining process, and there's a sentencing that's to take place.
In the meantime, Attorney General Faris Ariwari is maintaining that the arrests of Ramlogan and Ramdeen are not particularly motivated. But the opposition believes it's all a plan by the People's National Movement government to distract the public from what it calls its failures. We get more in CNC3's news report.
The PNM is known for distractions. As I say, let justice take its course. But on another level, we are known for distractions. We recall before elections, they charged Pastor Pandey. Recall before elections, things found in Bakshi's water tank. So there's a history of this. And I do believe the PNM is in desperation mode. They are in panic. We had a tremendous launch of a local government election campaign on Sunday. And I do believe that they will do all that they can in their desperation. It is interesting how we deal with certain matters on a selective basis with alacrity when there's so many other things outstanding.
The opposition leader says she hasn't spoken with either Ramdeen or Ramlogan, but maintains if they committed any wrongdoing, due process must be followed. While she shied away from saying if she's standing behind the 2 UNC members, the opposition leader says their arrest is no indictment on her or the party.
I always remember something my former leader told me. He says Jesus Christ had 12 disciples. And at the end of the day, almost everyone betrayed him. I cannot vouch for guilt or innocence of any single human being. I can only speak for myself. And therefore, I do not take it as an indictment. In my time when wrongdoing appeared or came forward.
But the Attorney General, in an immediate response, says his office did indeed pass information on to the police, but he says it has nothing to do with politics.
This is not an exercise of the Keith Rowley government. And we didn't cause anything to happen. What we did is we did our jobs. We did the respective investigative aspects within the boundaries that we have. We referred whatever we had to refer in many matters, not just current matters. In many matters, we have referred these products to the respective authorities, and I expect that those authorities will be acting with the same degree of anxious alacrity that the government acts.
The Attorney General says he takes no delight in the situation facing the two attorneys, but he says the opposition leader needs to be realistic and remove politics from the equation.
Did Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar reflect upon the fact that this is the second time Mr. Ramlogan has been arrested? Did she reflect on any of those things? You see, Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar is fighting for her political survival and relevance. And Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar will do what she must. I can offer no advice to the leader of the opposition, nor any complaint. There's a freedom of political expression and freedom of political will in this country, to each his or her own.
The Barbados Central Bank is reporting a positive outlook for the economy. Here are the details.
IMF has lowered its forecast for global growth from 3.5% to 3.3% over the last 6 months. The forecast for growth this year in the U.S. economy is 2.3%, and in Canada 1.5%. While the prolonged uncertainty related to Brexit has dampened growth prospects to just over 1% for the United Kingdom. The outlook for international food prices remains muted, but given geopolitical factors, there still exists uncertainty surrounding international oil prices in 2019. In recent years, the share of investment in economic activity has declined. The bank is encouraged, therefore, by the start of some new private sector investment projects, which will complement tourism activity and the impact of the new thrust in medical education services. Indeed, the rate of economic recovery will hinge on the speed of implementation of new investments and on the pace of economic diversification, which is needed to supplement traditional foreign exchange earnings.
In sports, we're on the pitch with cricket, as the West Indies has been given a rankings boost ahead of the ICC World Cup. The regional team climbed to 8th spot on a one-day international chart on Thursday.
For the Windies, the rise comes on the back of their outstanding performance in the recent 5-match series against world number 1 England, which tied 2-2. In the Test rankings, West Indies are now on the heels of 7th-placed Pakistan after gaining 5 points. The Jason Holder-led unit, which stunned England 2-1 in the recent 3-Test series in the Caribbean, are now on 82 points, but only 2 behind 7th-placed Pakistan, which dropped 4 ratings points. India sit on top of the rankings with 113 points, but lost 3 ratings points to see their gap on second place New Zealand shrink to 2 points after the Black Caps gained 3 points.
And that's the news on PBCJ. I'm Simone Absalom. Thank you for watching.
We live in a digital environment where information is easily accessed and opportunities are limitless. An age to think big, to innovate and lead. But beware, the digital space has its challenges. Manage your digital self carefully, because the consequences are real.
At least 10 incoming freshmen had their recent acceptance withdrawn after posting extremely offensive images and statements on a private Facebook group.
Stop and think before you broadcast and post messages. Before downloading third-party apps. Because your digital footprint follows you wherever you go. The Broadcasting Commission, your partner for a new day.
Hello, I'm Dr. Carlton Bird, Speaker Director for Breath of Life Television Ministries, and I want to encourage you to watch Breath of Life right here on PBCJ.
afraid of the dark, are you? Don't be afraid. Come with me.
Please, no! Oh my God, please, no!
Watch PBCJ's live coverage of the sectoral debates 2019. This May, the public debate in the House of Representatives between cabinet ministers, junior ministers, and their opposing colleagues heats up. You don't want to miss it. The ministers are expected to present their achievements to date and their projections for the new fiscal year. On the flip side, the opposition spokespersons on various portfolios will seek answers about government programs and policies. Remember, the sectoral debates happening Tuesdays and Wednesdays, May 1 to May 22. Brought to you live on PBCJ, the People's Station.
Well, I got involved with the peace management initiatives. It was living in this community, your Mountain View. The community was engulfed in violence. We would be in our communities and you would have men from other communities, different political persuasion would come to your community and fire shots and stuff like that. So at some point I was one who would talk to them, ask them to see how best we can get things on a level. My life before was one of a typical inner city youth, you know. We explore, you know, and we might get involved in negative things. I mean, some of us go far, some of us may not go that far. I remember one day clearly, we were at the back of the yard attack and this virgin from GX Road named Arrows just pushed the gate and come in on my yard. Point a gun straight on my forehead and said,
Hey boy, why the shoes them there? Oh, you not talk, I'm not a gun. Man, this and the man on a gun, man. May I chat to you? Shut up.
At that time, that in itself, you know, put me on a side.
Low badness, you know. Low badness.
My mother begged me to stay out of the way. More so that she don't even send me to a shop when nothing go on. At one point, I was a person that keep those guns at home. I went inside the house and I lift that mattress where sister and I, we both sleep on that bed. And when I lift the mattress and I look, me and my stepfather, I make 4.
What is? Give me this. Leave. Give me this. This you did it? Eh? This you really did it, my youth?
Stepfather actually pulled me over. First, he said to me, boy, I'm not going to tell your mother about them things, them life, and really the life you live. This another way to go.
What are you thinking in your head? How you make people out of road? See what want something like that in the yard.
Emphasize that to me, just be careful of what I do. At that point, it kind of draw me back a little. And not even a little, like a whole lot, because the fact that my mother never know, and now I'm going to know me, now I'm going to run here again. I'm good to see I'm here, at home.
The best thing for you right now is to think is to go to church.
Oh, still, no one then, me and the man them right up on the road. Me have a piece in my pocket or something like that. I did have a girlfriend who lived at Tel Aviv.